The Codex Gigas, famously nicknamed the Devil's Bible, is a colossal manuscript created in the early 13th century in Bohemia. It's renowned not only for its size, but also for the breadth of its contents and the mysterious full-page portrait of the devil found inside. It's also famous because the entire massive tome is believed to be the work of one single scribe, a fact that's been mostly confirmed by modern analysis. The Codex Gigas contains an entire Vulgate Latin Bible, but it's much more than a Bible. The remaining pages include many other works that together make it a miniature library of 13th century knowledge. It features two extensive histories by Flavius Josephus, a collection of medieval medical texts known as Ars Medicinae, and the Chronicle of Bohemia by Cosmas of Prague. In addition, the Codex incorporates various shorter texts, including a calendar of saints, various rituals, and even a few incantations intended to ward off evil. Most famously, one page is devoted entirely to a large color illustration of the devil. The documented history of the manuscript is as fascinating as its content. It was created in the Kingdom of Bohemia, in what is now the Czech Republic, sometime between 1200 and 1230. According to an entry on its first page, the earliest known home of the manuscript was the Benedictine monastery of Podlažice in Bohemia. This was a relatively small and poor monastery, which makes it unlikely that such an immense and resource-intensive book was produced entirely within its walls. Nonetheless, the Codex Gigas was treasured there. However, by the late 13th century, the monastery fell on hard times. In 1295, the monks pawned this great tome to another monastery, the Cistercian Abbey in Sedlec. It was soon repurchased for the Benedictine monastery at Barevnov in Prague that same year. Its fame had already grown substantially, and medieval sources described the Codex Gigas as one of the wonders of the world. Over the following centuries, the Codex moved through the hands of those who valued rare books. In 1594, Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, an avid collector of curiosities and occult items, quote-unquote, borrowed the manuscript. He transferred it to his castle in Prague and evidently never intended to return it, since the Codex remained in this Prague collection until the turmoil of the 30 Years' War, long after his passing. In 1648, as Swedish forces conquered Prague at the war's end, the Codex Gigas was seized as part of the spoils of war and taken to Sweden. From 1649 onward, this Czech treasure resided in Stockholm, becoming part of the Swedish Royal Library, established with the help of loot from this conflict. Sweden would end up as the Codex Gigas' forever home, but its presence there was not uneventful. On May 7, 1697, a great fire broke out in Stockholm's Tre Kronor Castle, which housed the Royal Library. In a dramatic rescue, someone saved the Devil's Bible from the flames by throwing it out of a window to the ground below. The hefty book survived, though according to one report it landed on a bystander and severely injured them. Following this close call, the manuscript was moved to a secure location. On New Year's Day, 1878, it was officially transferred to the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm, where it's been kept ever since. In modern times, the manuscript has occasionally traveled on special exhibit and even made its way to the Czech lands for a short period in the 21st century. In 2007, it was loaned back to Prague for several months, drawing large crowds eager to see the legendary Devil's Bible return to its place of origin after nearly 400 years. No account of the Codex Gigas would be complete without the eerie legend that clings to its origin. According to medieval lore, the manuscript was created by a single monk under extraordinary circumstances, with the help of the devil himself. The story goes that a Benedictine monk named Herman the Recluse broke his monastic vows and was sentenced to a particularly harsh punishment. He was to be walled up alive inside the monastery, perishing of hunger in complete darkness. Desperate to save his life, he promised that in one night he would create a book that would glorify the monastery forever, compiling all human knowledge into one volume. According to the lore, the abbot of the monastery agreed to these terms and said that if he could actually do this, he would be spared. So Hermann, the reclusive Benedictine monk, immediately got to work. As midnight approached and the enormity of the task became clear, the panicked monk allegedly prayed not to God, but to the devil himself. In exchange for his soul, the devil agreed to aid him and finish the manuscript in a single night. With this infernal help, the monk miraculously completed the entire book by dawn, inscribing the full Bible and all the other texts at supernatural speed. To seal the pact, the devil left his likeness in the book, which became the large famous portrait of Satan himself on one of the pages. Thus, the giant tome gained the sinister nickname, the Devil's Bible, since people believed no mere mortal could have created it without diabolic assistance. While this origin myth is both famous and chilling, unsurprisingly, it has no basis in historical fact. It likely arose as an attempt to explain the awe-inspiring achievement that the work represents. The idea that one person could produce such a massive and comprehensive book alone seemed unbelievable to medieval observers, so a supernatural story took hold. In reality, analysis of the handwriting indicates the manuscript was indeed the work of a single scribe, but over a far longer period. Experts estimate it would have taken at least 20 to 30 years for one person to write and decorate all the pages with such care and consistency. In other words, it likely represents the life's work of a devoted monk who labored for decades. We don't know the name of this scribe for certain, but the script strongly suggests it was one individual, and it was signed Hermann the Recluse. Some have speculated that this isn't the name of the scribe, since one of the primary virtues of the Benedictine order is humility. It's been speculated that Hermann may have been someone who the scribe was close to, like a mentor or perhaps a close friend. Notably, the Devil's Bible also presents another mystery beyond its authorship. The manuscript initially contained 320 sheets, but for reasons which are unknown, 12 of these sheets have gone missing. There's been significant speculation about what could have been contained on these sheets, though at least one of them is known to be the start of the book of Genesis. Legends have popped up around what was contained in these pages, with myths unsurprisingly focusing on the potential that something of occult significance was contained within. Beyond the myths, the Codex Gigas stands as a culturally and historically important artifact. It's a snapshot of 13th century knowledge and belief, encapsulating religious scripture alongside history, science, and even rituals, all in one book. The inclusion of so many diverse texts under a single cover is extremely rare, making it a kind of medieval encyclopedia. This suggests it was intended as a one-stop reference for a monastic library, meant to educate readers with a broad range of information, from the sacred to the mundane. Artistically, the Codex is significant for its scale and craftsmanship. Large illuminated Bibles were not unheard of in the period, but the Devil's Bible is exceptional even among these for its dimensions and the ambition of its creation. The full-page devil portrait remains unique in medieval art. While depictions of Satan existed elsewhere, no other known Bible features the devil taking up an entire page, standing alone as a symbol of evil. Werewolf-Witch Trials were a dark and fascinating chapter of early modern history. They refer to witch trials in which the accused were charged not only with witchcraft, but also with transforming into wolves to commit evil deeds. During the late Middle Ages and early modern period, There was widespread belief that werewolves were deliberate agents of the devil, much like witches. This cultural understanding laid the groundwork for trials where people were prosecuted for allegedly shape-shifting into wolves through sorcery. The first large-scale werewolf accusations emerged in the 15th century. In 1428, during the Werewolf-Witch Trials in what is now Switzerland, officials claimed that witches were causing various misfortunes and transforming to eat the locals. Several hundred men and women were reportedly convicted, meeting gruesome ends due to these accusations. Notably, any property of the condemned, for which there were no heirs, was seized by local lords, hinting that greed might have fueled some of these early accusations. It's been speculated that the most vulnerable people with few familial connections were targeted for werewolf accusations for this reason. From these beginnings, the fear of werewolf witches spread across Europe, peaking in the 17th century and fading by the 18th. Overall, such cases were a small but sensational part of the broader witch hunt phenomenon of that era. In the mindset of the time, werewolves were closely linked to witches. Authorities believed that to turn into a wolf, a person must have made a pact with Satan or used witchcraft, which also required a similar demonic pact. Thus, werewolf trials were essentially treated as witchcraft trials. Judges often used charges of witchcraft and lycanthropy interchangeably, viewing werewolves as simply a specific form of demon-worshipping witch. Manuals on witch hunting and demonology of the period, such as those by witch hunters like Henri Boguet in France, included sections on werewolves alongside other demons. Boguet himself claimed to have seen accused werewolves acting like beasts in the courtroom, and took this as proof of the devil's power over them. In short, to the courts of the 1500s, a werewolf was just a witch in wolf's clothing. This conflation meant that werewolf accusations flourished under the same conditions as witch accusations. People accused of being werewolves typically confessed to wild stories that mirrored popular witch lore. Many spoke of meeting a mysterious man in black, a common euphemism for the devil, who gave them a magic potion or wolf skin that allowed them to change form. They described attending midnight Sabbaths and then going on rampages while in beast mode. Such details were strikingly consistent across different trials, suggesting that the authorities and popular folklore supplied a script that the accused would ultimately be forced to follow. Historians have long questioned why the werewolf-witch trials became popular in certain periods and regions. Several socio-political and religious factors are believed to have created a perfect storm. Early modern Europe was rife with upheaval. Bitter religious conflicts, wars, famine, and plague all ravaged communities. Amid such chaos, frightened people sought scapegoats to blame for their misfortunes. Just as witches were blamed for failed crops or illness, werewolves became a convenient explanation for unexplained violence. If a farmer found his livestock missing, or worse, or if someone went missing in the woods, a werewolf became a popular creature to blame. This was compounded by the fact that real wolf attacks weren't uncommon in rural Europe, so it was a small leap to suspect that some wolves weren't wolves at all. Rather, they may have been your neighbors, with secret identities, disguised to hide their true colors. Religious tension further fed these trials. In regions where the church was still striving to stamp out lingering pagan or folk beliefs, accusations of shape-shifting served as a weapon. This was particularly common in the Baltic area, where some parts of the region weren't officially Christianized until the 15th century. These late conversions were generally done by force, making the lingering pre-Christian traditions stay around that much longer. Even in remote alpine regions of France and the Holy Roman Empire, which had long been Christian, local folklore persisted in a way that was often viewed as witchcraft by outsiders. Both Catholic and Protestant authorities in the Reformation era were eager to demonstrate piety and orthodoxy. To this end, they found that prosecuting the servants of Satan, such as werewolves, was a quick way to prove their reputation for faithfulness. Mass hysteria and psychological factors are theorized to have been deeply entwined with the Werewolf-Witch Trials. Much like the fear of witches, fear of werewolves could spread rapidly through an anxious community. Rumors of a wolf-like beast lurking in the woods, or a suspicious neighbor acting somewhat unusual, may send a community into a panic. Isolated incidents of violence or unexplained deaths were often interpreted in the most terrifying way possible. This collective fear was reinforced by lurid pamphlets and rumors which suggested that werewolves were essentially constantly on the hunt just beyond the edge of a town or village. Throughout the werewolf panic, numerous trials left their mark on history. One early case unfolded in 1521 in Burgundy, when two shepherds named Pierre Burgot and Michel Verdun were tried by inquisitors. They confessed that years earlier, a mysterious man in black had offered them an ointment to turn into wolves in exchange for their obedience. According to their testimony, they had attended witch gatherings at night and prowled as wolves, attacking innocent people. Both men were convicted and burned at the stake, along with a third accomplice who was accused of aiding and abetting their late-night romps. The case of Peter Stumpf in 1589 is perhaps the most famous of the werewolf trials. Stumpf was a prosperous farmer in Bedburg, in what is now Germany, who was accused of serial slayings over a span of 25 years. Under what I'll euphemistically call enhanced interrogation, Old Man Stumpf eagerly confessed to an extraordinary tale, which was taken at face value at the time. He said he had made a pact with the devil, who gave him a magic belt that allowed him to turn into a large wolf-like creature. In his supposed wolf form, he claimed to have eaten all manner of animals and people around town. The authorities made an example of him in a shocking fashion. Old Man Stumpf was broken on the wheel and then subjected to a variety of other horrors. As one final act of humiliation, his head was displayed on a pike as a warning to other potential werewolves. Meanwhile, in the eastern Baltic region of Livonia, modern Latvia and Estonia, werewolf trials became surprisingly common in the 17th century. There, local folklore held strong beliefs in witches and werewolves, though the peasants saw werewolves as magical beings rather than Satan's servants. One famous Livonian case was that of Thies of Kaltenbrunn in 1692, an 80-year-old man, who I've previously discussed on this channel. Old Man Thies freely admitted to being a werewolf, but claimed he was a good werewolf who traveled to hell to combat the minions of Satan. The judges ultimately let him go with a whipping and banishment, instead of the usual harsh punishment. By the 17th century's end, the werewolf craze had largely run its course. The latter part of the 1600s saw the rise of more rational and skeptical views among Europe's intellectual and ruling classes. Educated elites gradually stopped believing that the devil was literally transforming people into animals. The Enlightenment was also starting to take root, bringing with it a preference for scientific explanations over supernatural ones. What had been seen as evidence of diabolic possession began to be viewed as an illness or false confessions based on overly zealous interrogations. It's difficult to pin down exactly how many people fell victim to werewolf-witch trials, because records are incomplete. That said, werewolf trials were much less widespread than the more common witch trials. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here, just reminding you to click that like button, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, if you enjoy my content and want to support further, please consider checking out my Patreon. You can support for as little as $2 a month. Medieval knights, especially the Teutonic knights, are often imagined wearing winged or horned helmets in battle. It's a powerful image, but how true is it historically? Historical and archaeological records provide no direct support for the idea that the Teutonic knights, or any late medieval knight generally, wore these helmets in battle. Scholars generally agree that the winged helmet is largely a myth, not a feature of actual medieval warfare. Medieval knights sometimes decorated their helmets with crests or insignia, but all direct evidence indicates these were used outside of battle. And you'll notice here that I say direct evidence, but we'll come back to my phrasing on that shortly. Over time, people seeing illustrations of helms with decorative crests, or viewing flamboyant parade armors in museums, may have assumed these were battle items. The gap between battlefield practicality and artistic representation became blurred in the popular imagination, allowing the winged helmet legend to flourish. But with all that said, there's circumstantial evidence to suggest that it's possible that these helmets may have been worn in real combat on rare occasions. It's true that some medieval knights had helm crests shaped like wings, horns, animal figures, or other symbols. Knights in tournaments and festivals often attached light, elaborate crests to their helmets to show off family heraldry or to impress spectators. One famous surviving 14th century Teutonic great helm, belonging to Albert von Prank, sports a beautiful set of gilded horns. It's thought that this piece of equipment specifically was used primarily during jousting matches, in essence, as a way to show the status and wealth of this specific knight and his family. But let's come back to actual combat for a moment. There were good reasons why a knight riding into real combat would not want such appendages on his helmet. Big wings or horns made a helmet heavier, unwieldy, and also made the wearer a target. Ornate helmets may have been perfect for a joust, but most historians agree that in actual combat, very few knights were willing to hinder their performance to look impressive on the field. However, some have speculated that there may have been rare instances of knights who did indeed wear ornate winged helmets into battle, though it wouldn't have been common. The reason for this is personal honor that is bound up with the martial culture of knights. Knights had the desire to be seen performing heroic deeds in combat, and it's been speculated that it wasn't completely unheard of to wear these adornments into battle. Notably, on the other side of the world, in the Japanese context during the Sengoku period, samurai often wore flashy, ornate helmets and armor into battle. The purpose of this was to make it so battlefield exploits were noticeable to everyone, and some believe that European knights may have done the same on occasion. After all, both knights and samurai were heavily tied up in a martial culture bound by honor. That said, it must be kept in mind that this is a speculative theory that isn't currently supported by any evidence. The modern image of Teutonic knights specifically wearing wings and horns was hugely popularized by Sergei Eisenstein's film Alexander Nevsky. This historical drama, set in 1242, depicts the titular Novgorodian prince's victory over the Teutonic Order. It visualizes the Germanic knights as fearsome figures in white cloaks and grotesque horned and winged helmets, in contrast with the good, humble Russian fighters. While this film was, in essence, historical fiction based upon a real event, it essentially canonized a myth in the popular imagination. It took a kernel of medieval heraldic tradition and, through the power of cinema, turned it into an enduring legend. While we can't say for certain that no Teutonic knight or other medieval knight wore wings or horns during actual combat, we can say that if they did, it was very much the exception, not the rule. Instead, these heraldic pieces are largely remnants of the gallantry and pageantry of high medieval tournaments.